are you today? So sorry, we're having some technical difficulties getting on the stream today, so I'm having to do this from my phone. My son is setting up a new streaming service for me, and I thought it was all set to go, and it just would not work for me. Of course, that's for me. For him, it works beautifully. So, these technical difficulties continue to plague me. So I decided to just do this from my phone instead. So today I'm going to be working on a baby quilt that I started last week on Sewing in Slippers. Last week we had some audio issues, so if you missed last week's session, we're going to go through that all over again today. We are going to be working from this book called Storybook Quilts. I met Laura Piland last time I was at Quilt Market. Gosh, that has to be over a year, probably 2 years ago. And she was just beginning work on this book and proposing this book to the book, what do you call that, to the publishers. You have to send in a book proposal, and she was just starting to work on this process when I met her. Then I've been watching her on Facebook and on Instagram, and I saw that she had a display of her quilts at her local library with the storybooks that go with them. And I just love this idea because my guild decided to do the exact same thing. Our raffle quilt this year, our book related baby quilts. So that way people can take a raffle chance on a baby quilt instead of a big quilt that they might just not like for their home. Maybe the colors aren't right or the style isn't right for them. So we thought baby quilts are always in demand, and we would make some baby quilts for our raffle quilt. Instead of one big raffle quilt, we're going to have 12 baby quilts on raffle instead. So when I found out that she had published her book, I was so excited to see what was inside. And many of the quilts that are inside of this book are based on several different storybooks that are out there. Now, of course, it's always wonderful to give a gift with a book, with a quilt. I just love that idea. And I am going to a shower next weekend, and I didn't have time to make a quilt and get a book that went with it. However, I did go to a guild show, and I was able to pick up homemade baby bibs and baby books made out of cloth, and I was able to pick all of those up. So even though I didn't make them, they are still handmade gifts that I am happy to give. So if you love to give a handmade gift, I just love this book called Storybook Quilts. Yes, Elaine, we had a horrible time getting on this morning, and it's all good. It's all good. We're back in business now. So I held the camera up high because I'm going to be designing on this design wall behind me. So if the orientation looks a little bit strange, it's because I wanted to get more of my design wall in. And here at my sewing machine, I have been sewing up this baby quilt. So let me show you which quilt I based my quilt on. This one is the Chicks Run Wild quilt, and I just love the idea of that plaid looking quilt, right? It's just squares, but it ends up kind of looking like a plaid. So I took Laura's layout, and I'm doing the same exact layout inside Laura's book. However, I didn't have 3 fabrics. I didn't have a light and a medium and a dark in the blues that I wanted to create, but I did have a collection of lights and a collection of mediums, and I did have one dark fabric that I wanted to use throughout. So even though I'm basing it on her pattern, I did do things a little bit differently. So let me bring it over to my sewing machine, and we're going to sew this one up together. And one of the things that I love to do when I am sewing quilts, hold on just a second. Alexa, turn on sewing. So sorry, I forgot to turn on my sewing machine this morning, so I hope all of your sewing machines didn't just go on. One thing that I love to do when I am sewing up a quilt like this, when I'm doing a lot of piecing, is I love to use up all my old bobbins. So I grabbed any bobbins that I had that were in the right color range. So I might have to change bobbins quite frequently to use up all of these old bobbins. But I'm gonna just get this machine started. And what I do on my machine is I use my 1/4 inch foot, but it doesn't set it to a 1/4 inch automatically. I have to move my needle position over to 6.0 in order to get that perfect 1/4 inch seam. Now you'll see some seam tape on my machine, and it's not really set at the right spot. The seam tape that I have on my machine is made for doing half square triangles. And today I'm just sewing regular old seams. So I don't really need that seam tape, but a really good idea for a new quilter is to put a line of tape on the edge of the seam allowance, or even putting a stack of Post-it notes. That's really my favorite way to do things. A stack of Post-it notes next to the seam allowance will give you a little ridge to run your fabrics along that ridge, so you'll be able to keep that 1/4 inch seam allowance really easily. Now, I know that Elena's watching and she is an expert piecer. She doesn't need any tips on piecing, but maybe you're just beginning your sewing journey. Well, I have a theory. I love my beginner quilters to start with a touch of applique. When you add a little touch of applique or one applique element to your pieced quilts, it really elevates the level of that quilt and it makes you look like an expert. So after I sew this quilt together with you today, we're going to be adding a little touch of applique to this quilt. So I have quite a bit of work to do. We're just going to sit and work together. So go ahead and send me any questions that you have in the chat or any comments that you have about making baby quilts for your loved ones. So I'm going to put a little survey out there. Do you always make a baby quilt when you have a new baby in the family? Or do you feel that a store-bought quilt is gonna hold up better than a handmade quilt? Or do you feel like that little personal touch is exactly what the new couple or the new family needs in order to share your love with that new little baby? Well, I haven't made a whole lot of baby quilts for the new members of my family. However, a few years ago, I made a quilt called One Sheep, and that quilt was based on Sherry Noel's book with words on quilts. And I took one of her little designs. I made a copy of that design for her book release. And that quilt, called One Sheep, had one big sheep on the quilt. And I'll see if I can find a picture of that and put it in the comments. But I just love that quilt because it was all made out of adorable fabric that I found with sheep on it. And the sheep itself was just made with circles. So it's really fun to make a animal with circles. And that sheep was absolutely perfect for using the circles to make that sheep. So that was a really fun one to make. And what makes me really happy is every time I go see my nephew, he's 4 years old now. He's going to be 5 pretty soon. And every time I go to see him, he has that One Sheep quilt in a little tent in his room. So it is his playtime quilt. It's not one that he sleeps with, but it's one that lines the tent in his room, and it makes like just a nice little area for him to play. So let's go ahead and, oh, looks like I ran out of bobbin thread. So let me go ahead and add that bobbin thread. And I think I need to invent a little sling for the back of your machine that picks up or that holds all of the pieces that go over the back of the machine. Mine just fall on the floor, and then I have to reach under and grab those, and I don't have room in my sewing room for a table to go behind this sewing table. So I'm constantly picking things up off the floor. Let me know if you do that too. And maybe we need to invent a sling that goes on the back of your sewing table to catch all of those pieces. So I did run out of thread in my bobbin. And so I'm having to start again and do those last few pieces that I thought were already sewn. And what I'm doing is I tried to speed up the process. When Laura had written her book, she had you lay out all of your 4.5-inch squares independently of each other. So I tried to speed up that process by strip piecing my fabrics. So I had this piece of light color, and then I had a piece of the medium, and I did one long strip of the light, one long 4.5-inch strip of the medium, and I put those long strips together, and then I cross cut in order to make the whole piecing process just a little bit faster. So that would be my only thought on that book, is that the book is not geared towards quick piecing methods. It's really geared towards making these adorable quilts that any mom or baby or new family would love, but it's not geared towards strip piecing or quick piecing methods. And anytime I can make things faster, I do. Especially if I were using all one fabric for my lights, all one fabric for my mediums, and all one fabric for my darks. In her book, I would have sewn my darks to my mediums in big long strips, and then I would cross cut those strips into the 2-unit pieces. Now, when you look at that quilt, you could actually do a whole lot more strip piecing, but where I am making this out of scraps, I'm just using up what I have. I didn't do that much strip piecing. I only put my lights and mediums together. I put my mediums and darks together, and I was just cutting units of 2 at a time from those strips. So now I'm putting my units of 2 together into units of 4, and I already did that for my dark strips. So now I have a full strip going across with all of my darks and mediums together. So I ended up having 6 strips of the darks, 5 strips of the lights and mediums. So the darks and mediums go together, the lights and mediums go together, and then we're just going to alternate those strips. So I'm not going to just sew all day with you. I'm going to start putting these up on the design wall. And then the next decision, once I get enough of this done that I can really see the pattern coming together, then I need to make a decision. Are we going to put some applique on this quilt? Now, originally, I had designed this idea to put Larry Lobster on the front of this quilt. But then I found this blue fabric with the moons on it. And I really want to use it because I've got a bolt of that fabric, so it'll make a perfect quilt back. So I wanted to use that fabric in the quilt front. I can use it on the binding as well. So this quilt may end up just being the strip piecing and not having the applique on it. But in my opinion, a little bit of applique goes a long way to elevate your quilts. So let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens once we get this up on the design wall. I'm just going to sew a few more seams with you and get this up on the design wall so we can see what the pattern is coming together like. Good morning, Savannah. So nice to see you. I got a late start on sewing in slippers today, and this is actually a project that I really need to get done. So we are just having some sewing time together today, Savannah. So it's nice to see you out there. We're just going to sew together today and see what we can get accomplished together. So I hope that you're taking some time while I'm sewing to get a project done for yourself as well. So it's just our sewing time. I've got my slippers on, and I truly am sewing in slippers here in my studio because I need to get this quilt done. So on sewing in slippers, sometimes we have a applique project that is actually, an educational segment where we're actually gonna teach you something new that you can do with rotary cut applique. And other times it's just sewing together and having some fun. So I think you will end up picking up a couple little tips or tricks here if you are new to applique or new to strip piecing. But for the most part, we're just having a nice day getting some sewing done together. Now for my Ahead of the Curve members, we have an all-day sit and sew on Friday. So I'm hoping to get this quilt far enough along that on Friday, I'll be able to add the little applique lobster if that's what I decide to do with this quilt. But with that busy fabric, with that busy, oops, I dropped a couple of pieces. With that busy blue fabric with the big moons on it, I'm not so sure that I'm gonna want to put that applique lobster on there. But I'm curious to see what it's gonna look like, and let's give it a shot and see what happens. So now I'm putting my, after I put my two groups of two together, and I'm just trying to do light, medium, and then I'm putting my groups of four. So after my two groups of two are together, then I'm going to make that into a group of four. So just some really basic strip piecing here that I don't do very often. I very rarely do a pieced quilt these days, but I thought in order to really work through my stash, when I do applique, it doesn't take a whole lot of fabric, so I don't really get that far through my stash. I get through a lot of background fabric, but not a lot of these older prints that I've had in my stash forever. So I really want to start working through my stash this year. So I'm planning a series of small quilts that will really be stash buster quilts. And I'm hoping that with these stash buster quilts, I can clear out some of my storage bins in my garage and make room for some of the new quilts and new fabrics that I am working on. So many of you know that I've been working with Island Batik on a line of fabrics, and I tend to accumulate fabric when I'm working with a fabric company like that because they're sending me fabric to get some projects done, and because they're always sending me new fabric, I'm not using up this older fabric that I have in my stash. So I thought this series of baby quilts would be a wonderful way to work through the fabric in my stash, and instead of appliquing an entire quilt like the Baltimore quilt that I'm completing for our getaway in up in Maine. I'm working on that Baltimore quilt. I really want to get it done before I go up to Maine next month So normally that quilt is right here, and I took it down this morning so that I would have a place to build up this little baby quilt. And gosh, with all of that running out of bobbin thread, I have quite a few little pieces here that didn't get sewn, so I'm out of order. And where I should be putting my groups of 4 together, there we go. I think that's the last group of 4, finally. I thought I had them all set up, but it looks like I've still got a couple of groups of 4 right there that need to go together. Then we can lay this out on the design wall and see what we need next. So when I am sewing and chatting, I'm not necessarily paying attention. And am I getting these colors exactly in the right spot? We'll see. We'll put it up on the wall and see. Now, I don't mind doing a little bit of ripping because I love to just chat and visit with all of you. So I'm not really paying close attention to what I'm doing. So hopefully I've done it all right. So what are you working on this morning? Elaine, what have you got going on? Savannah, what are you working on today? Do you have your whole day to sew, or are you running from place to place and doing lots of things? Hi, Vicki, you made it. Okay, you made it in from the garden, and now you're ready to get some sewing done. So, Vicki, we got a little bit of a late start today, and I'm working on a baby quilt for the Pregnancy Center on Cape Cod. So I started that last week, but we had some technical difficulties with the sound last week. So I'm just diving in a little bit further into that project. And right now I'm making a little baby quilt out of 4.5-inch squares. I grabbed all my blue fabrics that I've been accumulating over the years, and I'm trying to work my way through some of this fabric that's in my stash. So I've got all these pretty blues and teals, and I separated them into lights, mediums, and darks. And I have now my rows of darks put together, darks and mediums, my row of lights and mediums, and now it's time to put them up on the wall and see what's missing. Did I put any of these out of order? So let's go on our design wall. Now, when I have a design wall like this is the K flannel. It holds on to the fabrics pretty well. If I have a big quilt up there, I only need a couple of pins to hold it up. But when I am doing, oh, you can't see that edge, so actually let me just slide this over. When I'm doing strips like this, you can see that once it starts to fall down, it all falls down. So I'm gonna just put up a pin on each corner, and let's move that over even a little bit further for you to see. And then we're gonna alternate our dark rows and our light rows. Now in the camera, it's really gonna tell me the story. Did I get my darks and lights right? And in the camera here, I can see that this one right here, that's really acting as a dark rather than a medium. So I might just have to swap that one out. But you know what? I don't think the babies are gonna care. So I think I'm just gonna keep on going and see what happens. And look at that. I've got a medium on this end, and I need to end with a medium over here, and I'm 1 block short. So every row, because I put 4 and 4 together, but there's 9 blocks, I need to add a medium to the end of every light row. I already added the dark to each end of every dark row. So let's go ahead and get those up on the wall and see what's gonna happen when we put that pattern together. This is such a simple quilt, but simple quilts are fun because they're really easy to do. I've got a few little mediums here. Let's see what happens when I add a medium to the end there. Okay, and let me know if anything's not looking quite right. I used quite a blend of mediums, and some of them were on the lighter side, some of them were on the darker side, so it's really hard. Let's see, this one starts and ends with light, and I need to start and end with medium. So let's see if I did that on all of them. This one ends with medium, so that's a good one. So I've got a little ripping to do already, I can tell. But really what I want to see is once I get the pattern going, does it give you the checkered effect that I was going for? When I saw her pattern, I loved that checker effect. To me, it looked like a tablecloth. And what better thing to put on that tablecloth than Larry the lobster? So let's go ahead and see how this works out. I love it when I have someone to sew with here in the sewing room, even though we're miles away. Elaine's up in Canada. Savannah, did you say you're in Illinois? Is that what I saw? Oh, hey, Mary Pop, nice to see you. Yesterday I finished a quilt top, the BOM from 2023 Mississauga Guild. I was short 10 inches of background, but found a close match. Oh, wonderful. I will post. Missouri. Yeah, I thought that was where you were, Savannah. I don't know why I read up in a above post. I thought you said Illinois, and I'm like, wait a minute. Maybe she's traveling. Maybe you're visiting somebody. But you're in Missouri. Yep, that's right. Okay. So, yeah, I've got a little bit of work here. I can see that I definitely need to add my medium on each end, and I'm going to need to move some of these around because I don't like these two mediums right next to each other when they're the exact same print. So I'm going to have to be swapping some of these around so I don't have duplicates. And look, I've got these two mediums right one on top of the other, and I don't love that either. So I really need to spend a little bit of time to maneuver these, make sure that they are laid out in a nice pattern. So when you're doing a scrap quilt, it makes things a little more complex because you do have to worry about what goes next to what. So we've got these same two prints here, and so I definitely want to move these around so they're not all in that same row. So doing a scrap quilt can be a little more challenging because you've got to do a little balancing before you just start sewing things together. When you're doing a quilt, that's all the same fabrics. If I had followed Laura Piland's instructions and I had used just one light, just one medium, and just one dark, then there's no decisions that have to be made, right? So it really makes a faster, easier quilt. But when you're like me and when you want to use up your stash, you don't mind spending the time juggling things around a bit. And I actually love using scraps. I think a scrap quilt is just so much more interesting than a quilt with all the same colors throughout. So let me just get a few more of these up on the wall. Then we'll decide how I'm going to need to move these around. And I'm going to need to cut a few more of my medium squares in order to begin end to end with a medium on all of these pieces. And that also means I'm going to need to do a little seam ripping because I don't have a medium on each end of this piece. I actually have a light. All right, so tell me what you're working on. Elaine just finished up her quilt, which was the Mississauga Quilt Guild's, did you say Quilt of the Year? That's pretty cool. Can I flip the strips instead of ripping? No, not really, because they need a medium on each end, and they need to have 9 squares. So this one, yeah, I should have looked at it first, right? This one I believe is 9 squares with a light on each end, but let me double check that, Elaine. Yeah, I sometimes, when I'm on Zoom here or when I'm on a live here, I don't always take the time to look before I start doing because I'm just keeping busy. And sometimes I make more work for myself. You're absolutely right. So let me double check this one and see if I could have flipped instead of ripped. But I don't think so. I think I just started the whole strip wrong, and I needed to start with the medium and end with the medium. So we've got 1, 2. We're looking for the mediums here. Oh, that's what I did wrong. I've got 2 mediums in a row. I've got two mediums in a row. So that's what I did wrong, and I should have ripped out that seam instead. But that's okay. You know, we're just having some fun here working together. So I don't mind um, taking a little extra time to figure this one out. So yeah, the problem was not that I started with the light. The problem was that in the middle of the strip, I had two mediums together instead of light medium, light medium, light medium on every one. So let's rearrange these strips and make it kind of pretty. And I just love that effect though. Don't you see that plaid starting to happen? Just because of the placements of the lights and the mediums. But I also see a lot of light, light, light right in that middle. And I want to move around some of these lights so that we don't have a row of all of the same fabric, one on top of the other. And quite honestly, I had it all laid out the way I wanted it last night. And then when I ran out of the bobbin thread, my pieces got all mixed up. So I'll have to do a little bit of ripping and rearranging, but that's okay. What I really want to find out is my lobster going to hold its own on top of that type of a background? Where the lobster is red, I'm hoping he's going to hold his own on that background, but I'm not so sure that's the case. So let's give that a shot and see what happens. So I've got my pieces undone and I've got my last strip of blue here. So I'm looking to see, do I have any of the light strips without these two in the middle? And that's what I did wrong. I'm going to have to actually take out one of these seams, flip it around so that these two are not, the lights are not right next to each other, because that's exactly what I was aiming not to do. So the only row that's correct is this bottom row right here. All of these I put together incorrectly in the middle, but that's okay. We'll do a little bit of ripping. It's always a challenge when we're doing something in front of the camera and not really thinking it through. So let me grab my lobster. And I have two different lobsters that we created. And I want to see if either one of them is going to look good on this background. Now I'm going to place him upside down only because he wants to hang down. His arms want to hang down. But when I'm presenting the quilt or putting my label on the quilt, this little guy is going to go in kind of the bottom quadrant, right? The other thing is he going to be too small on a quilt this large? So I think I'm going to put him here. So when I flip the quilt around, it's going to be in the bottom corner over here. But let's see what happens. Let's see if he's going to hold his own on this busy, scrappy background. And let's see what we think. I really just wanted to get this quilt together far enough so I could see, is the lobster going to stand out on that background? Okay, and yeah, okay, I kind of like it. I really do. I think that red lobster holds its own on that background. But let's think about what goes behind him. Maybe I'm going to do the light color right here, this lighter light right here behind the lobster, so he's going to stand out even more. But I think what's going to be better is if I have one of the lights and then one of these and alternate those down the course of the quilt. So instead of having all this bubbly blue, which is a darker blue, I want to do this. I want to alternate this one and this one. That was my original plan. So even under the lobster, we'll be alternating. We'll have one of the light color and then one of the less light color. It's still light, but it's not quite as light. So I'm kind of happy with the lobster. I was wondering if he was going to be big enough. Last week when I made a different lobster with his tail kind of curled around, like he's on the bottom of the sea and he's just lounging out there. When I made this lobster, I realized he was going to be too large for the project that I had in mind for him. But I love to just play and see what I can create. So we did this lobster a couple of weeks ago with the curvy tail, and I could certainly add a second lobster to this quilt. But I really like the look of just the one lobster. I think it just makes it really kind of a stylized design. Instead of having the two lobsters, I think that takes away from him. I believe I'm just going to have the one lobster. And I don't want the one with his tail curving under. That was for a specific Baltimore block that I plan to make. But the one with his tail curled under, when I went to put him on my Baltimore block, it's only a 20-inch block, he was too big. So I'm going to need to scale this one down in size. I made him with the medium Leaves Galore tool. And I think I might want to scale this one up in size. When I make a pattern for this lobster, I think that he needs to be even bigger and bolder on this quilt. So I'm kind of liking the whole effect. I think that if I were to choose fabric, say I'm going to make a quilt for the cover of a pattern, if I were to choose fabrics for this quilt, I would go with my darkest one being about this range right here. So I would change from this super, super dark blue, and I would make my my light, my medium, and my dark only as dark as this block right here. So I think you're going to see this quilt again. I think I'm going to play with this quilt again, exaggerating the size of the lobster, making him even bigger, probably with the Grand Leaves Galore tool, and making my blocks light, medium, and dark more in this range of light, medium, and dark, and not going as dark as this one right here. So this has been a really good experiment for me today, and it's getting a baby quilt done for the pregnancy center out on Cape Cod. So it certainly is not wasted time. I need design time where I can work out these questions that I have. Is the red lobster going to be bright enough to be on that blue background? And now that I'm seeing the work in progress, I really would like to go, with my darks one step lighter. This one even right here, I chose that as a medium, and quite honestly, in the camera, it's almost as dark as this one. Even though the background isn't as dark, because of all of this breaking up the dark background, these two really read the same way in depth of shade. So when I'm planning a scrap quilt, it would be a really good idea to take a photograph of all of those fabrics together. Look at the lights and the mediums and the darks and rearrange a little bit. If they're not truly reading as a medium, move those into the dark category and get a better medium for this position right here. So yeah, I've got a little bit of reworking to do on this quilt, but let's think, this is a quilt that's going to the pregnancy center. Are the babies really going to care? Are the parents really going to care? But I care, and I want to put out something out there that I'm really, really happy with. And that one color that I put into the medium category really is misplaced. So I'll do a little bit of work on this quilt, a little bit of pulling out, and you're going to see this quilt again. I love the idea of this tablecloth style quilt, and putting that lobster on there. And if I made this quilt into a big old square, this would be a great picnic table size for a card table that you might set up at your next lobster boil. Now, of course, I would get a big old sheet of that clear plastic tablecloth material. And if I did use this quilt for my lobster boil, I would put a piece of that clear plastic right over the top to protect your quilt. Make it hang down even further than the quilt. That way, anything that drips when you have a lobster boil, it's kind of messy. Any drips and any juice that drips down the side of that tablecloth is going to land on the floor and not on the quilt. All right. Thank you, Savannah. I like the lobster too. He's quite fun. Now, you just finished piecing a plaid quilt the other day. It's on my wall, but needs quilting still. Savannah, I would love to see your plaid quilt. There's another quilt out there called Plaidish, and it is made from different size strips of fabric, and it really gives you the look of a tartan plaid. Because of all of those different sizes and the way the blocks are laid out, it's much more of a plaid quilt, where this one is more of a checkered tablecloth. So I said plaid, but really what I should have said is a checkered tablecloth. Well, I know I've got my work cut out for me. I've got to do a little bit of unstitching, a little bit of restitching, but I love this idea and this concept of having a really simple background with that adorable little lobster appliqued on top. He's going to be really easy to applique. It's only going to take me an extra hour or two to get that lobster appliqued on top of the checkered quilt. So I think it's well worth adding that little special touch of applique and making this quilt something really, really unique. So for today, I'm going to say goodbye for now. I'm going to get my work done, getting these blocks rearranged, a little bit of unsewing and rearranging is going to make me much happier with the end result of this quilt. I've got that full bolt of that blue fabric for the backing and the binding. I don't think I'm going to put a border on this quilt, but since I have lots of that fabric, I might just choose to do a border of just that one fabric on the quilt as well. I think just the binding itself will be great, but I might just play around with putting a border on the quilt and making it just a little bit larger. It makes me want to add a small applique to the one I made. Savannah, you know that's my goal in life, to add a little touch of applique to all of my quilts to make them extra special. Now, I hope that you enjoy putting a little touch of applique on your quilts, and I hope that that was a little inspiration for you to add just a touch of applique to elevate the level of any quilt. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Elaine. You love the design, and I will see you all again very soon. Bye for now.